David, the football regulator is now in existence. The first meeting's been held with the clubs. What were they asking of you?
Well, you know, it's an incredible moment today. 110 clubs turned up in Manchester, along with all the major institutions of football. That's the largest gathering of football clubs in the history of English football. There's never been as large a gathering. And the reason they came to Manchester, the reason we wanted to meet them, was that we can tell them exactly what we're doing in terms of the new bits of regulation that we're going to be consulting on over the course of the next couple of weeks. And actually, they're getting a sense of what the regulator is going to be. And that actually is something that, despite the fact the Premier League was against the regulator being created, the Premier League was incredibly positive about it. The EFL's been incredibly positive about it. The whole world of football is now engaged with us. So they were pushing us on what we're going to do. They want to understand where we're coming from. We gave them a lot of information, a lot of answers on that. And so far, you know, the reaction's been pretty positive.
So is it the EFL clubs wanting you to do more and the Premier League clubs wanting you to do less?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the Premier League obviously has got a vast array of things it's having to deal with at the moment, its clubs, but it knows, because it's been involved in negotiations with the EFL over the last few years about distribution, that football hasn't actually met to resolve some of its issues. Us coming in, particularly with my personal history with both the Premier League and the EFL, means there's a new kind of influence in there which can be helpful to both sides. So I think actually the Premier League, regards us as being pretty helpful. The EFL clubs, and there are 72 of them, all have different views about what they want from regulation depending on where they are in the EFL. But again, they welcome our creation because they think we can be helpful in resolving big issues that are facing football.
The perception has been the EFL clubs, knowing you're coming in and can force a redistribution deal from the Premier League, means that they can just sit back, not agree to anything in the Premier League, and hope that you just manage to force a strong financial deal on the Premier League.
Well, I hope they don't think that, because that isn't the way this is going to work at all. I mean, the way that bit of our job will work is that we are now doing a thing called the Stated Game Report. That's in the legislation. That Stated Game Report is about the whole world of football. We're going to be assessing risk for clubs. We're going to be looking at the whole pyramid. We're going to be looking at the way in which money is distributed at the moment. And we're going to be working with the EFL and its clubs and with the Premier League and the clubs to find solutions there. The idea that that is going to lead us to imposing a solution that the EFL think is just going to be gerrymandered for them is not the case. We're way off having any view at all. I have no view at all today on what may the outcome of that be. So I think that I don't think the EFL is complacent about where we're coming from. I don't think the Premier League is. I think this is a way of reaching conclusions once we got the data, and we haven't begun to get the data.
Are the Premier League clubs doing enough, or do you see the EFL clubs squandering their cash?
I don't have a view on either of those things. I think 1.6 billion is a lot of money to be laying out over a 3-year period, as the Premier League does. Obviously, a substantial proportion of that are parachute payments. There's a whole debate about parachute payments, which, again, I'm just about to start thinking about. But at the moment, I don't think we are prejudging this, either by the Premier League or by the EFL. The bigger issue, I would say, Rob, I mean, I don't want to move on from this, but I mean, is everybody in football is talking about distribution. At the moment, there's an enormous amount of money coming into football for media rights deals. I mean, I used to do those deals. What nobody's thinking about is what happens if those deals stop paying as much money? You know, where are we going to be in 3 years' time in the world of football? Where are clubs going to be in terms of their risk profile? And that's what we've been set up to think about. We're a financial regulator, and that's exactly the way in which we're going to start judging these issues about the long-term risk. And that's part of the negotiation that will then take place.
So this is not to assume that the TV millions will exist for years, decades to come?
I as somebody who, since 1999, worked on those TV deals, as I did, I'm responsible with, you know, the executives of the Premier League and the EFL over the last 30 years of having worked on those deals. You can never, in the world of media, rely on anything. Everything changes. You know, even in the fantastic operation that is Sky Sports, economics change and the world changes. And so what we're going to do is take a genuine view of what is possible, both in terms of the upside and in terms of the downside.
So the Premier League have warned of unintended consequences. They think your existence is going to damage their marketability around the world.
Well, they did warn of that when they were fighting against the Premier League, the regulator being in existence. I don't think they're saying that now. I mean, actually, after today and after all the other meetings we had with the Premier League, I think they're much more confident about the fact that we are working with them, we're not challenging them. And to be absolutely honest with you, I've worked on bringing in millions of pounds into the Premier League in my career. Why would I want to restrict in any way the success story that's the Premier League? The Premier League is about this country's growth. It's about football's growth. I'm absolutely in support of it.
Fans will see there's already the Football Association, there's the Premier League and the EFL and the National League. Why are you needed? Is it a waste of taxpayer cash having a regulator?
Well, I think what was really interesting, we'll come on to taxpayers' cash in a second, because it's not the taxpayers' cash that's actually going to be paying for the regulator. It's the world of football that's going to be paying for the regulator. So just to be clear about that. However, the fan-led review, led by Tracy Crouch, was all about fans being dissatisfied with the way in which they work in the world of football. And the fan engagement legislation a regulation that we're going to be putting out next week, is actually going to be addressing the issue of how clubs work with their own fans. And there's a very extensive level of consultation we're doing about fans and clubs and the way they work together. That's come about because that doesn't actually always happen. It happens in some clubs, but it's not happening throughout the world of football as a matter of course. So I actually think fans are going to be very happy the regulator exists, and all the feedback we've had in the many, many meetings we've had with supporters groups is indicating they want us to be there.
And many will want you to root out rogue owners. Is there any owner over the last few years that if you'd been in existence, you could have stopped ever buying a club?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I think I'm right in saying since 1992, there have been more than 60 clubs that have gone to the wall as a consequence almost entirely of the way owners have operated towards them. Now, what are the two things you need to have to prevent that from happening? You need to have enough knowledge about the way the club is run, the way the finances operate, the way the owners are operating in advance. So you go from a green light to an amber light. The amber light is flashing and you have to take notice of it. That's never existed within the world of football as a risk assessment. That's exactly what we are able to do. The whole licensing regime we bring in will give us the knowledge of how clubs are operating and how owners are operating, which will indicate to us if there are rogue owners. Once we know there are amber lights flashing, then we can move in and we would investigate and we would take whatever decisions we need to deal with it. But I have to say, there are rogue owners, but they're few and far between. What I actually think is much more of concern in the world of football, not rogue owners, is good owners. Good owners who down the leagues are spending money on keeping their clubs going and are still losing money and are facing an uncertain future. And to come back to your earlier point, here's all this money that's flowing into the world of football, yet if you talk to the owners of clubs in League One or League Two, they're still losing money. That's a model that actually needs to be really assessed, and that's what we're going to do.
So that'd be introducing salary caps and things like that to
No,
limit.
we have no remit over salary caps, but it's a question of whether, we'll come back to the issues of distribution, come back to the issues of the way in which the world of football works, come back to risk assessment, we can take an objective view, which currently isn't really taken.
When you look at some of the ownership issues, so it's been owners who don't have the finances they say they've got, they lose interest and perhaps withdraw the finances. How can you really have the investigatory powers to discover that they don't have the finances they say they have?
When you see the proposals we're putting out next week on a whole raft of financial regulation, on licensing, you'll see that we absolutely have those powers and we absolutely have the ability to get that information. So I'm not at all worried about us failing to get the knowledge and the information. And then I'm actually less worried even than that of having the powers then to act on it. We are a completely different entity. We are a financial regulator in the world of football that has the power to get knowledge, which will mean that the flashing amber lights, just to use that metaphor again, actually will be much more clear. And we have those powers and we will use them.
Would you have stopped Chansiri buying Sheffield Wednesday?
Well, I don't want to comment particularly on an individual club, but my understanding is actually when he bought the club in 2015, you wouldn't have necessarily, and for the number of years later, you wouldn't necessarily have had that amber light flashing. But clearly we would have become more and more aware, over the period of the last few years that there was a problem. And clearly now, we are, without commenting on an individual club, we're going to take notice, and we have been talking extensively to people in Sheffield. We've been talking to fans groups, we've been talking to the EFL almost on a daily basis. We're pretty much across what's going on. And when we're in a position to act, we'll act.
What about owners with dubious human rights records? Can you go beyond the state? How can you really investigate? What's the threshold? Who would be a rogue too far?
Well, we're a financial regulator, and you'll be aware that the legislation was changed by this government from the previous government, which takes us away from the issues of a state owner buying a club or whatever it may be. What we're absolutely focused on is financial stability and solidity, and that's my remit, and that's the remit I have to stick to.
So you couldn't stop the North Korean regime buying a club?
You know something? It's a theoretical question which I'm not going to get into here. We are going to be assessing owners on a whole raft of measures because we have the powers beyond those of the Premier League and the EFL, both in terms of international legal and law enforcement and right the way through to financial stability. But I'm not going to answer a theoretical case on this. Everything we do will be on a case-by-case basis.
But nothing to do with human rights?
It's not part of our remit to actually take a judgment based purely on human rights.
Obviously, many have questioned your own appointment. You've been confirmed in the role despite the fact there's an ongoing investigation into whether you should even have the job. Should you have taken it up yet?
Yeah, let me explain why. In May, the Select Committee interviewed me. They said I was entirely qualified for the job, as indeed have many other people. Sir William Shawcross decided about an investigation. That investigation is not actually about whether I'm a fit and proper person to do it, because it's entirely irrelevant to what he's doing. He's looking at the process by which I was appointed. That process is obviously something for DCMS, for the government department, rather than for me. And they, I think, thought it was going to take a few weeks. You could argue that they could have appointed me there and then. They didn't, but the Shawcross inquiry went on for a few weeks, and now it's been 5 months. And we have got to get on with doing what we're doing, because without them appointing me, we couldn't appoint our non-executive directors or our CEO. So they appointed me. There's other appointments that have taken place. It's a matter of actually dealing with the issues that face football. And when Sir William decides he wishes to report, no doubt he will.
And if there's any impropriety or issues found, would you step aside?
Well, as I said, the issues aren't about me, and they aren't about impropriety. They are actually about the process by which DCMS reached the conclusion that I was the right person to do it, and therefore there's no issue of impropriety in that at all.
Do you regret not being more open about your donations to Keir Starmer's campaign? I
entirely disagree with the premise of your question. I have, for 2 years, been absolutely open about the fact that I was a Labour donor, that I've written 2 books about the Labour Party, and that I was chairman of the Labour list. You know, if you walk like a duck, quack like a duck, the probability is you're probably a duck, right? So therefore, my political affiliation was completely known and declared. I declared the donations, which I didn't actually have to do because they were below the limit, to both Lisa Nandy and Sir Keir Starmer at the Select Committee, and I think there was an entirely appropriate time to declare them.
So some have said you're a Labour stooge, are you?
Do I give the appearance of being a stooge?
Some will be asking, obviously, after the Select Committee.
You know something? I don't think anybody who's ever worked with me or anybody who's seen me in this job today would give any house room whatsoever to the idea that I'm anybody's stooge or anybody's crony. I've had a very long career being a highly independent individual. The IFR is a politically independent organisation. In fact, now I've been announced, I'm looking forward to meeting the Conservative front bench and all the other front benches of opposition parties, because we don't work for a political party or a government. We are completely independent. It's what it says in our name, and I intend absolutely to act as an independent chair of this regulatory authority, which means relationships with politicians of all types.
That independence gives you an ability to comment freely. The big issue hanging over English football is what is happening to the Manchester City case. The hearings concluded last December. There's still no verdict. Are you someone who thinks that should be sped up?
Well, clearly it's absolutely nothing to do with me. It's a pure Premier League issue. And I just note lots of people within the Premier League, among the clubs, have been surprised by how long it's taken. But really, beyond that, I have no comment.
And we saw again, the big issue many years ago was whether Premier League games should be taken abroad. This week, UEFA has given approval for Italian and Spanish games to be taken abroad. Is that something you can really resist in your role to protect the heritage of football here if there's a majority of Premier League owners who want to take games overseas?
Well, let's just deal with that a couple of things. So I was actually working with the Premier League when the 39th game was invented and failed to get a vote in 2008. I note that Richard Masters, the Chief Executive of the Premier League, has said that they will not be happening within the Premier League, and I think that's the right decision, and I echo his decision. I also don't think there is a majority of English clubs within the Premier League who actually are voting for this. In fact, there's no indication of that whatsoever. But actually, ultimately, you're right. Part of our job is the heritage of the English game. Part of our job is working with the fans groups and the views that they have. And therefore, as far as I can tell, if you believe in the heritage of the English game, it's pretty difficult to believe that home games in the Premier League can be played overseas.
So you would work to stop that?
I simply echo the fact that the British Masters of the Premier League has no plans to do it.
Is there certainly the role of the fact you might have fans thinking that you can do more than the powers actually give you? So every VAR decision, everything?
Every VAR decision, the cost of meat pies, ticket prices, everybody thinks that we've got the right now to come in and wave a magic wand. And actually, funnily enough, within the legislation, our remit is pretty tightly defined, and we can't do any of those things. But yes, you're right, expectation management here is going to be, as much as anything else, part of the job. But you know something? That comes with the territory. We're starting on this journey. Today was a really significant day on that journey because we are linked into our constituency, and we'll be not engaged in mission creep. We're going to be engaged in doing the job properly. That's what we're all here to do.
Thanks so much for your time.